Hello, I'm Steve Fange. I'm born in Syracuse, New York, and grew up there till I was about 10 years old, and then moved to Virginia, near Virginia Beach and Williamsburg area, and grew up there through high school, and met my wife in high school, and went to Virginia Tech, majored in finance, and worked my way south to Charlotte, North Carolina for my first job, and with Price Waterhouse and another company there, and then worked to Columbia, South Carolina at Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I've been there ever since for 27 years. And let me just describe the environment a little bit. It's a great place to work, but in terms of just the culture in a large company is maybe different if you're not familiar with it. There's challenges that go on. There's things that HR challenges in terms of not discriminating, in terms of hotline compliance calls. We are a government contractor, and so anything related to compliance is of critical nature because we could lose a major contract with the government. Our contracts are not small. They're like anywhere from 100 people to 700, 800 people at one time. So it involves many different families and lives and communities and impacts to cities and even to South Carolina. And so compliance is taken very seriously. And part of just the culture, I want to say, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, because we were concerned about the culture and diversity of our workplace, senior executive management said no Christmas cards anymore. It had to be holiday cards. It had to, in terms of any kind of emails, it could not have personal stuff going through emails anymore. So you can't just send a prayer request through the corporate email. That's against corporate policy. You can be fired. And so it's just a different culture. So in terms of resources, the corporate resources, using copy machines for Christian stuff, or using any kind of corporate resource conference rooms or people's offices for pulling people together. Basically, that's just all against corporate policy. And so it's just a different culture. And you very much want the culture of your company to win because you want the business to do well. And but it's in terms of transitioning into just workplace ministry and just understanding the spiritual things that are going on in the workplace. There's ways to thrive spiritually inside the workplace, but you have to do it within the constraints that God set up in the design of the company, and you have to honor the company as well. And some of those things for me, really, it was a progression in my life initially. So when I first came to Blue Cross, I really felt my witness was the key piece to focus on. So my integrity, what came out of my mouth when I was angry, what did I say? How did I react to people? Just honesty when people talk to me. So I focused on all what I call the inward qualities of a Christian, thinking that that's what I was supposed to be doing in the workplace, to be a good image for what a Christian should be in the workplace. But after about 10 years, I really felt like God was saying, done. Now I want you to initiate spiritual conversations with people. And I wrestled with that because that is definitely fighting culture. It was also about the same time the Christmas card message went out. So you clearly heard what the executive staff's tone was relating to that. Some people tried to start a prayer meeting in the auditorium in the mornings about 4 years earlier and got slammed shut in terms of disciplinary action, in terms of that's just not appropriate. So the culture was not one that promoted that kind of thing. And so, but it's, the business is not designed to foster spiritual development. So, I mean, that's not an expectation you should put on a business. So from a standpoint of what I felt God was telling me to do was basically learn how to effectively initiate spiritual conversations in the brief moments that you have in a workplace. And the fundamental difference between workplace and, I'll call it, full-time ministry in a church is time. In workplace ministries, you don't have time to set things up in a conversation. you have to react that fast because you're probably just going after the meeting when people are dismissing. You probably have 3 minutes to talk to someone going down the hall to where they're going to go to where you're going to go. Or you'll catch people at break, and break is 15 minutes, and if you exceed break, that's a violation. And so you don't have options about time. And so how do you boil down the ability to quickly get a spiritual conversation going in a short period of time in a non-offensive way that really gets them to want to reciprocate? And so those are some challenges just in the workplace that we have. And I'll say at Blue Cross, but I'll say every company. And so whether it's a small business, now there is a big difference in business. There's been a misconception. If the CEO of a small company that's not public, a CEO can do a lot of things, even though there's federal guidelines on HR policies, they can get away with a lot more than any mid-sized to large company, and especially a stock-based company. Their rules are just going to be non-negotiable. And so in a business, you can't put us all in a business hat. You have to say, is it a small business owned by a CEO that really can call some different shots for the company? But even then, they have hiring practices that have to conform to federal law, and they don't have an option. And so, but then what I described earlier is for what I call mid-sized to large companies, and they don't have an option. Related to a key piece in my life during that same time where I felt I needed to initiate spiritual conversation, the thing that really drove me there was I was teaching Sunday school at my church, and it's about 25 people in Sunday school, and I like to have brainstorm discussion kinds of things, and I thought it'd be a fun icebreaker, and I just did it as an icebreaker. But I asked everybody to list everything they're involved in, because everyone's always whining about, I'm so busy, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. And it was like, well, I want to know what they're doing. And so we put it up on the board, and it was a large whiteboard. It was an 8-footer by, I think it was 6 by 8. So this is a big board. And when we finished, the board was full. And it was everywhere. And it wasn't just a Northeast Columbia view of activity. It was a Columbia activities, it had statewide activities, it had national activities. There's people on national boards, there's people doing national associations, there's officers nationally, all in this 25 people Sunday school class that I'm just going to call a normal Sunday school class in a large church. And I was just stunned. It was, oh my gosh, these people in this room have an enormous impact to the United States. But somehow we sort of crowd all that back up in church, and we only talk about them in church, and we ignore the rest of the influence that they have. And so that was a very meaningful, directional push me to initiate spiritual conversations in the workplace. Because it was like, okay, I spent 8 hours minimum at Blue Cross. I won't say the total, and I'm around those people, and if you take those 25 people, the way my mind works is 25 times 8 hours. There's hundreds of hours of potential ministry time throughout each day if you view the world open as that's where the church needs to be, not just within the 4 walls of the church, where the address is of the church. And so from a standpoint of ministry, so now I'm focused on how do I initiate those short spiritual conversations? And so I practiced. I tried different things. Some worked, some didn't work. And so, but the thing that ended up being most effective for me was I started a thing that I just said, how many Christians do I know? Because actually I was a little chicken, and I said I'll start with Christians before I'm going to a non-Christian. And I only knew at that time, I had been a good Christian for 10 years at my company, and I knew 4, maybe 5, I don't exactly remember, but I remember it was one hand, Christians in the workplace. And so I didn't know who they were. But so for those 4, I said, I'm going to go have break with them, and I'm going to share my testimony in about 3 minutes, and then see if they'll share it back. And I'm a vice president there. And so that by nature creates fear and untrust in all sorts of things in people's minds. And so the person across from me, they didn't know why I called them for break, and some of them were fearful. Most of them were fearful. And so from a standpoint of trying to, how do you in 15 minutes try to break down the trust barrier so that they can trust you, and then reciprocate back a testimony it takes practice. But the quicker you can become transparent, they see that transparency and go, gosh, this is a vice president. He's telling me that he's no good, and he sins, and he needs Jesus, and that is unusual. and so from a standpoint of building that trust, when I can do that in 3-4 minutes, that creates a platform for them to want to reciprocate back in trust. And so what I did is I met with those first 4 people and shared my testimony. They each shared back. Afterwards, I asked them permission if they knew anyone else that they thought was a Christian. And they ended up, one was still not trusting as much, but she ended up the next day, she said after she prayed about it, she wanted to give me the names. And I met with each of those people, and it took about 3 months or 4 months, somewhere around there. Then I got to about 20 people, and it was like, my goodness, we all need to get together for lunch. This is like unbelievable, because all these people don't know each other, but they do know each other because they work with each other, but they don't know. And so we met at San Jose Mexican for lunch. 20 people showed up in their back room, and it was a party. It was like, oh my goodness, I knew you were different. I knew something about you, and all this fellowship just happened, and it was intense. And that ended up meeting monthly for about 6 years, and it grew into over 100 people, and we called it CLC, and it has since about 2, 3, 4 years ago changed where it's still called CLC, but now instead of networking all sorts of people together, it's now focused on leaders, and so it's challenging leaders for Christ. And so it's smaller now because we're really focused on the leadership team of people who are basically committed to share Jesus in the workplace and feel that that's their calling. And so from a standpoint of just background and practice, it's just practicing learning how to initiate a spiritual conversation, seeing if the Holy Spirit is there, and if it is, continue the conversation or meet again. But the underlying fabric that's necessary in a workplace is prayer. It's you just don't go far without it. And so consequently, what happened very quickly, the year that I decided to go public, so to speak, is my prayer life just mushroomed in terms of, oh my gosh, I need to be praying for these people. It's like I only have 2 minutes, I only have 4 minutes, I only have 15 minutes. You just can't do anything without God. And so from a standpoint of tagging people, I got so many people on my prayer list, I had to put them in sections in the workplace. There's the people I called the brick wall. I didn't give them they didn't earn the name brick wall until about 5, 6, 7 years after I've been praying, and nothing happened with these people. And then there's a middle section, and these people had professed to me in a conversation that they were Christians and that they knew who Jesus was, and they went and they acknowledged the gospel, but they didn't want to do anything in the workplace related to acknowledging that, other than they told me, but they didn't want to go active with it. And that's my middle band of people. And then the bottom band, they are incredible to work with. They are energizing. I just left a meeting right before here with one of them in there, and I met another one in the hall, and she said she's praying for me today specifically for this video. It's hard to describe when you work side by side with someone for a long time, many years. I've been there 27 years. That when people can give you those couple minutes of prayer, couple minutes of encouragement, it just transforms the workplace environment. And that's really what CLC has done for so many people. It's just transformed work into, they pay me to work well and be a minister at the same time. And so it's a thing that has just grown. And another piece that's grown is as we meet people, I ask them, what's God telling you to do? And I had a guy about 2 years ago say he really wants to start a men's group. And it was like, a men's Bible study luncheon. And we looked for allies in some churches and didn't find what we needed, but then he started to come to a Tuesday, called it a men's forum. It's by Focus Living. And a guy named Perry Bowers there and David Andes came along our side and basically shored us up with some good teaching and structure, and he organizes it and communicates it, and we communicate all through personal email because we don't want to go through that corporate email system to violate anything through the corporate. So people have to sign up. So it's a word of mouth thing and then get on a personal distribution, and that's been his ministry. And that's another thing I didn't say back about the CLC thing. Is once we started to organize and have lunches, I had someone come up to me because I don't organize well, and they basically said, "Steve, I'm really good at organization, and I would love to do this for you." It's like, great, because I suck at it, and I need you. And so she felt she was using her gifts. That just made her blossom. And then about 3 months later, someone said, my thing is prayer. I love to intercessor prayer for people, and I would love to know all the people in CLC to be praying for people out there all the time. And she organized a group of intercessor prayers. There's probably been about 9 people through it total, and there's usually about 3 or 4 active all the time. They have been meeting weekly for probably 8 years. A church down by Columbia Mall has opened the doors that they can use the sanctuary during lunch hour. And they go down there regularly to pray for all sorts of people in the workplace. And it is just beautiful. I know with confidence that I'm being prayed for regularly on everything I do for protection spiritually, as well as success through the business. And it's a beautiful thing when you get that kind of community going while you're working side by side with people. Where God's taken me now is I've taken the roster off the CLC and the roster off the forum, and I picked off the men in that, and I'm really feeling as about a month and a half ago, that I need to be meeting with them, not just to pray for them, but to love them by actually, and if you knew me, this is hard, it's like spending time with them. I'm not a people person naturally. I'm an introvert, and I love analysis and data, and I'm in information systems. I didn't say that, so I'm a techie, and so getting out to see people is a stretch, and so but I really felt like I was supposed to do that, and so far everyone I've had so far, it's been probably 6 or 7, has just been off the charts in terms of God's enormous blessing on the conversation during a break. And so far they all been breaks, so they all been 15-minute things, and God just goes zooming in it, transforms both of us, and we leave super encouraged and super with a new direction of where God's taken both of us. And an example of another kind of thing, so besides the breaks, another example was just listening to people who want to talk. I was having a meeting, it was scheduled in my office, someone came in, actually a senior management person, and they came in all excited about a book that they were reading. And it was I don't know if I can say the name of the national person who put out the book, but a national star hero put out a book, and everybody wanted to read it. And she read it, and it talked about peeling away the ego in your life, and inside you're really beautiful. And she was passionate. She was just talking loud and just all this kind of stuff. And I'm just praying, saying this is a gag, and it's a, we're supposed to be working. This is not break. This is my office, and I was doing all the things wrong that you should be doing. But that's where people praying for me and the Holy Spirit teaching me that He's going to use me anyway happens. And so what happened was, long story short, at the very end of this passionate delivery, she goes, "What do you think about that?" And I just prayed that I would tell her, but he told me to be gentle, which I didn't want to be, but I compromised a little bit there. And I drew up on the whiteboard, here's the gospel. When you take away this, take away that, and look inside Steve Von Fange, he is evil. And I am hopeless, and I need Jesus. And then I said, and we're going to start this meeting because this is driving me crazy. It's been 25 minutes and I can't, I got to start. And I started the meeting and I didn't even give her time to respond. And I got a phone call at 11 o'clock at night where she went home immediately and started talking to her roommate, and they talked all night and realized they needed Jesus. And told me the next day that, I got the phone mail as I'm coming into the office, because I always check phone mails coming in. So I usually have a dozen phone mails from what happened during the night from our systems, and I'm just going, oh my goodness, I was a jerk, and God used me anyway. And that is just the way God does things. He chooses to use us jerks to expand His kingdom. And so from a standpoint of a message to you, since you're our pastors and teachers and leaders of the future spiritually, there's a couple things. View church bigger than your walls, and view ministry as bigger than your church. And so there's people, if you drew that whiteboard of all the things your congregation is doing, not only in your community, but in the city and in the state and in the nation, and now, because that was 10, 15 years ago, now I'll say internationally, you are going to be blown away at the influence your church members have if they realize that is what you're trying to get them to do. But a lot of times what is happened at church and why we have church-damaged people is the message that comes across is about the four walls. You need to be here at this church. You need to do ministry here. You need to get educated here. Everything is around coming here. And the situation, and so their comeback is I don't have time for that. And if you view that ministry is where they are, and you equip them with what they need to do ministry on the ballpark, and it's not just adults in the workplace, it's students at school. They have lunches, they have hall time, they have locker time, they have time after school, they have time at sports practice. They can be effective ministers for the kingdom of God. But if you just view them as students that need to be supervised, or a youth department that just needs something for them to do, you're missing it. That's ministry at those high schools and middle schools and elementary schools. And it's ministry at the workplaces. That's where they are. They don't need to spend time any extra because they're already there. So how do you get them to get the vision that they're the pastor, not you? You're equipping them to minister where God's placed them. They have access. I have a little card somewhere here that it's a, I think it'll be in focus. This card right here has a built-in electronic device. You can't see it. And you cannot come see me in my office. You don't have access. Only Blue Cross employees have access to come see me. And so from a standpoint of ministry, that's the way most workplaces are going. And that's the way the schools are. You can't go into a school. But your members have access. God's already given them access and put them there. They just need to have vision that that's why they're there. And that's your job. Your job is to get them to see it and to believe it. And then they need some help. They need to know how to initiate spiritual conversations in minutes. Because at the locker, they can't be late to class. And when I'm in the elevator, I have 2 minutes in the elevator. You just don't have time. So how do you initiate spiritual conversation? How do you get prayer techniques so that they're already praying for these opportunities before they happen? How do you teach Bible 101? These are church-damaged people. How do you even find a church? How do you disciple people? Those are all fundamental. How do you give your testimony? Those kinds of things are critical. That you enable them with that kind of equipping, and it's one of those things that each of us need to do what God's called us to do. And I'm doing my thing. I need you to do your thing. And if we do that, it's going to be cool for the kingdom. It's a thing that God's kingdom's going to grow, and He's going to use our inabilities and screw-ups, and He's going to expand the kingdom through us, and it's beautiful. And I look forward to partnering and seeing in heaven how this has all come together.